Hi family, friends, it's Mark Tandle here in my home in Hartwick, New York, the beautiful Hartwick, New York. I own 30 acres here. I own that valley and 700 feet behind my house. And when my grandsons, granddaughters come over to Grandpa's house, they got something to play with here. I think there's 80 or maybe 92 exact replicas of famous, infamous, and legendary Monster Jam trucks, and I think there's 27 radio controlled trucks. But the real reason I'm making this video is this display here. I put this together because it's a tribute to my favorite drag strip, some of my favorite all-time drag racing cars, and my particular history with this drag strip. So I guess I'll get right into that first. It was July 1967. I had just recently turned 13 years old, living in Santa Ana, California. Well, sometimes Costa Mesa, Newport Beach. But anyhow, I was used to seeing nice street cars. Camaros and Mustangs had been out, and a few other cars. So it was July 67. I'm sitting in my kitchen and I hear a truck pull up on right up on my lawn outside, and honking the horn. So I run out there, and it's a friend of mine, Ron Kazier. And Ron's father owned a construction company that just happened to be building the racetrack. And they were starting to put together the guardrails, and so they needed some help, physical help, putting together the guardrails. I represent them here with the popsicle sticks, red and white. And the guardrails were quite long. They were literally 15 feet on either side, and it turned out to be a race. The spectator side that I was on, we beat the pit side by about 150 feet, or about 3 chunks of railing. So anyhow, they told us that they're not going to pay us, but they would feed us that day anything we wanted to eat, burgers and fries, all that stuff. They had a really great snack bar there. So one of the first of its kind. They called it the SUPER-TRACK. So, and they also told us, they would give us a free pass to the opening show and a pit pass. So there was a large crew working on this. They had a big truck with an auger digging all the holes all the way down the track, and another truck with flatbed with all the posts, and another guy's dumping cement, and other guys cutting off the angle of the post, and then another guy's with a huge drill putting the holes through the posts. And then that's where I came in. My little crew, our job was to put the big 2-foot long bolt through the hole, put the washer and nut on it, and then my job really started. I had a huge ratchet, so I had to tighten the bolts, and then we'd cut the excess of the bolt off so people wouldn't catch their legs on it, and put it in a 5-gallon pail. By the time we got to the end of the track, nobody could lift that 5-gallon pail. So that's how it started. And one of the owners, a guy named Mike, was so impressed with the work that we did, so happy with me being a 13-year-old kid putting in the hard work I did for 7.5 hours. He gave me his business card, had the track's official logo on it, and on the back he wrote my name, Mark Tandle, to identify me, that I didn't just get the card someplace. And he wrote lifetime member, free admission, including pits. Then he signed it and he initialed it, and he said, when I put this initial on here, anybody that works here will recognize this as something legitimate. So gosh, for the next 4 years I went to Orange County International Raceway basically for free. The only thing I had to pay for was burgers and hot dogs and fries and stuff. So that's how I got my involvement with Orange County International Raceway. Then from there, I would say, being a 13-year-old kid, when they opened in August '67, I was aware of hot rod cars, which would be represented in my parking lot here, which I'll get to in a minute. But first I want to make mention that I was used to seeing hot rod cars, but I'd never stood right next to a nitro-burning, top-fuel dragster at about 2,500 horsepower at the time. And when I was only 25 feet away from Don Garlitz, when he fired his car up, shouldn't even call it a car, it shook the ground and blew me away, and the smell of nitro was almost, it did make you cry. So I became immediately injected, infected, and addicted to this sport they were calling drag racing. By the way, I've asked a lot of people why do they call it drag racing, and nobody knows, but I'll tell you right now. Back in American history, the small towns were being developed. They were all kind of dirt roads, and the main street on these small towns, it would get covered with ruts and from horses and wagons and stuff when it rained. So they would take a big long post and they would drag it behind a team of horses, and that post would drag the mud streets smooth again. Then they wouldn't let anybody get on it till it hardened, and they used to call that dragging Main Street, which led to the term of just calling Main Street the main drag. And then back in the 50s or 40s probably, people started challenging each other to a drag race on what they called the main drag, because that was the best road, the straightest and longest. And so that's where the term started, dragging the dirt streets of small towns, and called it the main drag. Let's go drag race on the main drag. So now that I've explained that, I want to get to one of the main events that blew everybody's mind every year, became one of the world's most popular events. They call it the Manufacturers Funny Car Championships. And as that billboard says, 100 funny cars. That's every bit true. And these are some of the photographs of them lining up those cars down the length of a drag strip. And then I even have a copy of the radio broadcast prior to that. It said something like, folks, bring your cameras and your movie cameras. The county OCIR is going to attempt something that is going to be outrageous. We intend to line up 100 funny cars down the track side by side and have them all light their engines at the same time, which they did. And I'll tell you what, to this day, that's probably the loudest thing I'd ever heard in my life, and the whole ground shook like it was a freaking earthquake. And I was sitting just about in one of those seats right there, pretty close to the tower. And it used to be that my favorite funny car was Big John Masmanian's '69 Barracuda. There he is racing Don Schumacher's '69 Barracuda. Some front engine dragsters. And Ray Alley's, his engine shop built the engine in my Nomad. So these are some famous cars. Tom the Mongoose McEwen. I had a 71 Dodge Colt, just like the Sox and Martin car. The first queen of drag racing, Shirley Muldowney, doing a fire burnout. Jet dragsters. So these are just some pictures of the sights and scenes from inside the tower. Some photographs. Here's a picture of my girlfriend at the time. Ann turned out to be my wife and mother of my 3 kids. That's her wearing a t-shirt at the last drag race. That t-shirt's actually right there. Mine got kind of overused. There's the advertisement for the last drag race and the drag racing championship finals. One race you never wanted to miss every year was called the Fox Hunt. If you missed the Fox Hunt, don't tell anybody about it, because if somebody says, did you make it to the Fox Hunt, and you have to say no, they're going to tease you. That's a race where the Orange County International Raceway says if you bring your girlfriend, if she's wearing a bikini, she gets in free. So they would pack the grandstands, just like you see there, and there'd be about 5,000 girls in bikinis, so that's a race you wanted to see every year. And the pits were kind of small. Like there's a good picture of the pits. They had the Santa Ana Freeway ran just south of the drag strip, and they would tell all the vendors, your big trucks, park them alongside the fence there and leave just enough room so you can get your wares out without taking up a lot of space. And then bring a smaller delivery van, which you see represented here by these smaller vans and pickups. You could deliver your goods through the pits, which were about half a mile long, so that's how they used to do it. And my 57 Nomad, which is right here, represented right there. Well, heck, it had a 65 Corvette 327 in it came with a a Rochester Fuelie system on it. We threw that out, put a 650 dual feed Holley, Fram filters, Hurst clutch pressure parade and linkage, hooker headers, Edelbrock intake manifold. I always used STP, Mr. Gasket gaskets. My ignition was all Excel. Everything, coil, distributor, dual point distributor, even the yellow wires. So that's what the pits represented. And they had actually 15 staging lanes, which I guess you could see down in that picture there. So that's a view that I would normally have for where I would sit. They had 15 staging lanes. I only have 5 of them represented here, but they are legendary cars. Richard Petty 65 Barracuda, just so many. Sox and Martin, Dick Landy, everybody. Dick Grumpy, Bill Grumpy. These are all legendary Pro Stock and Super Stock cars. Some of the earlier ones, Big John Mansmanian's cars. These here are all the typical vehicles you'd see at a drag race, including the Safety Safari tow truck and the Southern California Timing Association trailer. And the tower would have a news crew on there with a news camera. Sometimes they'd have a helicopter flying overhead. So what you see on the track represents how they used to line the funny cars up down the track. So it took me quite a while to assemble this. I think there's 72 of them here. They are exact replicas of legendary funny cars from the 70s. Nothing newer than a 1983, because that's the last race that they ever had. So this is my collection of funny cars. And actually in the background there's even the tow pickup trucks that went with each car, or each funny car. For instance, you know, Tom McEwen's car there, Bruce Lawrence's car, Don Perdome's truck. And then I also have, I think there's 12 legendary wheel standing cars represented by photographs here of the real thing. And there's Little Red Wagon and Hemi Underglass, which is represented right there. You have Pure Hell and Pure Heaven over here in the altars. There they are. So those were some of the more legendary races. Then 1970, Big John Masmini came out with his new 70 Barracuda, and that became my all-time favorite drag racing car, represented right here, front row center in my collection. And the pits, some of these vehicles that you see here in the pits, like for instance the Moon Equipment race team, they showed up in force. They were over in Long Beach area. Most of these cars I put my own decals on them, like this Corvette racing team. That's all 100% my decals. My Raider racing team, 8 balls, because it matches my drum set. So I put together this collection of what you would typically see in the pits. And then the parking lot. That gets very interesting in the parking lot. After I think it was the second event that the guys from Ford and Mercury, they went up into the tower and they announced that they were inviting all the Ford and Mercury guys to park with them in the parking lot, and they weren't going to be greedy. They're going to park way down in one of the farthest places, and they invited everybody to be there. And they said, we're going to hang a big sign on the chain link fence, which is represented right here by this little Ford sign. That's what they did. Well, heck with it. They hung up actually the sign that they had said Fomaco, Ford Motor Company. And they hung a sign there, and all the Ford guys started parking there, and all the Mercury guys. So if you had like a 64 Ford Galaxy 500 with the teardrop hood and the 427, you know, or one of their Thunderbolts, or a Fairlane, or just so many of them Thunderbirds, if you parked with them, or if you had a Mustang, you wanted to park with the Mustang guys. If you had like these open engine guys, everybody turned out. It was like birds of a feather, as they say, flocked together. All the Volkswagen guys used to hang out together. Nobody would let them park the Volkswagens too close to the ticket booth entrance, because they said, you foreigners, you get a place way down in the parking lot. Then there was some truck clubs in a van club, and I just happened to have a 55 Ford panel truck that I called the Moose. I have a few photographs over here, by the way. That's my 68 Camaro with what turned out to be my wife. My 71 Dodge Colt Hemi, that sucker beat my Camaros, Mustangs, it even beat Corvettes. So my 68 Camaro was flawless until some girl whacked it, so it got put in a executive auto salon, and they did a $8,000 Mercedes-Benz paint job after taking it down to the metal. These are some of the pictures of my panel truck, the Moose. It had a 69 Boss 302 Mustang engine in it, 378 horsepower, so it kind of got up and went. This is my pool table. In fact, when I'm done making this video, I'll probably break a rack here, listening to some tunes. So, but I wanted to say, after the Ford guys established their spot, the next thing you know, all the GM guys, the Chevys, Pontiacs, Oldsmobiles, Cadillacs, all of them, Corvettes, they started parking together. You'd see all the Camaro guys together, all the Impala guys, and all what they call the shoebox guys. There was a club called the Nomads. They kept inviting me to join their club, but they were out of Anaheim, and I was down in Newport Beach, and I didn't want to travel that far and pay $33 a month just to join their club. I said, you don't mind if I park with you in the parking lot? He said, hell no, your car still attracts a lot of people. So what they soon learned is you you wanted to back your car up into each lane because you wanted to pop your hood, and there were so many spectators walking up and down, they couldn't see under your hood if you were parked nose to nose. So after the GM guys claimed their section, well, wouldn't you know it, the Mopar boys, they ended up with the best area closest to the ticket booth, which was down in this part of the track. That's also where they used to park all the collectible TV cars, the George Barris cars, you know, the Dracula and the Munsters and Batman and the Monkey's car and Gidget, all these cars, the Red Baron's car. Those are all famous show cars, and one of my favorites ever made by Ferrari, the Dino. And so this was the Mopar, and you'd get the guys with the wings parking all together. You'd get all the Challengers and the Chargers together, and then they had a club called the CUDA Club, and that was the 70-71 CUDAs, and they would park next to or with the Barracuda Club, and that's really my all-time favorite car, is the 69 Barracuda. There's the real tickets to the last drag race and our pit pass. So, and then the last thing I would point out, this parking lot soon became the biggest, coolest car show that you'd ever want to go to. It's right in the middle of Orange County, you know, one of the greatest places for cars ever. But it soon became the greatest swap meet you'd ever go to, because Dodge, this represent right there, Norm's Dodge. He was really smart. He showed up with a big Dodge van, and he parked it out in the parking lot, and then he was selling parts to the spectators, you know, coming in, and then the next thing you know, you'd see the Delco GM parts and the Ford parts. And so the parking lot went from being not only the biggest car show that you'd ever want to see, it was also the biggest parts trade for nice cars. This was my Camaro after it got an $8,000 makeover from Executive Auto Salon in Santa Ana, California. After that happened to it, used to look like this. It was nice. This was my 62 Impala, which is represented right there. I have a copy of all my vehicles in my display. So, well, that's basically, and my motorcycle even. That's pretty much the story of my tribute to Orange County International Raceway. There's a couple other details, like they would always apologize to the crowd for not having enough space, because they'd say, we leased this property between the Santa Ana Freeway and the El Toro Marine Air Force Base, and they only gave us so much room, so if you don't get into the main gates to Raceway Road off of Sand Canyon Road by 9:30 in the morning, you'll end up having to park out on Sand Canyon Road, and we start sending a van out at about 10 o'clock in the morning to pick up people and bring them into the track. So that turned out to be, man, you would have to show up at the track, even though racing wouldn't start till like 11 o'clock or maybe noon or something. You have to be there no later than 9:30 if you want to park in this parking lot. So I was always there, and because I got in free all the time, I made sure I was there. So this is my story about Orange County International Raceway. To this day, I think it's the coolest drag strip that I've ever seen anywhere. Speaking of cool, there's no place else on this planet I would rather live. Everywhere that I look on my property, it looks like a Norman Rockwell painting. So that's my story today. I guess I'll turn around and look in the mirror and say, peace out. Click bang, what a hang.